Hi, everybody. So, my guest for the next hour or so, or however long we end up talking, is my friend Savannah Rodgers. She is a filmmaker. She has a project in the works called Polly that they're currently fundraising for. I thought it would be cool to come on and talk about that and talk about her films and just talk about movies in general. So, first, before we get started, it would probably help if I let you all meet Savannah. So, Savannah, thanks for joining me. How are you this evening?
I'm doing excellent. I'm here talking to you, so that's just like stellar already.
Nowhere to go from here but down,
Yeah,
or hopefully up. Okay, so
definitely go up.
Okay, so we were talking a little bit before we started recording, before we started the official show,
Yes.
and I have the to me this is like the perfect place for us to start our conversation because you showed me some of your films before we did this, so I could sort of do my homework and bone up on the Savannah Rodgers oeuvre, and and one of the things you showed me was, I guess it was one of your student films where you recreated a scene, one of the great scenes from Kevin Smith's Chasing Amy, which which is like, I think it's probably my favorite Kevin Smith movie. And so I would just like to start by talking about Chasing Amy, and like I get the feeling from that scene that that movie is important to you. So why don't we talk about what is it about the film Chasing Amy that made you want to recreate that scene and that sort of speaks to you?
Well, that's a loaded question. Basically, and I feel like I say this so much that people are like, "Oh my God, shut up!" But Chasing Amy is my all-time favorite movie, which can be a controversial opinion, being in the LGBTQ community, and because a lot of it can be interpreted as like a male fantasy for having sex with a lesbian. But I completely disagree with that interpretation. And my pug is here, and he's making a lot of noise. But for me, I think it's a really kick-ass movie about a pansexual woman who doesn't take shit from toxic nerd masculinity that manifests in like these men in her life. And Alyssa Jones is one of the greatest characters I've ever seen. And knowing the history behind the movie it just makes it all the more richer, like where the movie came from, what inspired it. It's really quite beautiful to me, and it was the first movie I saw that made me think, oh, so you don't have to be exclusively gay or straight. There is this middle ground,
Yeah.
and I'm pansexual, so that was really meaningful for me. But also, I think it's one of the most well-written movies I've ever seen in my life. The I love you, all the great monologues of that movie,
Yeah.
all have a different intent behind it, and it's just beautiful, and it makes me want to push myself to be a better writer. And I saw that movie, and I thought, wow, writing's a job. That's what people do. And so that kind of set me on the path. So being able to recreate that scene was really important to me, and the actors just put on a great interpretation of it, because I gave them the script and I said, don't watch it.
Yeah.
I sent them the scene if they really wanted to, but they just made it their own and made it a little more updated to how I think that fight would go in 2016 with all that kind of like misogyny and all that shit and how the time changed. So it was a really special thing, and I'm glad you liked it and watched it because
Yeah. Well, I know what you just said about, and it makes sense now that you explained that you didn't have your actors watch the original scene.
yeah,
And for anybody watching who's not familiar, the scene that Savannah recreated was the big like epic breakup fight that Alyssa and Holden have outside the hockey arena,
right,
and your actors in your version, you're right. They're not doing what Affleck and Joey Lauren Adams did in
right.
the original. They're doing their own thing, and there are some similarities, obviously, that I guess are unavoidable because they're working from the same material, but a lot of it is very different. Um, and yeah, I thought it was terrific. And as someone who really likes that movie, I thought it was cool. Um,
She slaps him, and
yeah,
she did not tell him. So that reaction you're seeing, it's like, are you fucking kidding me? You just slapped me.
that's awesome.
And so the two actors were brilliant. Gregory Lee Nielsen and Jesse Burkett. They're both Lawrence, Kansas, and Kansas City locals. They're fantastic. They went all in, and basically Greg was like, "You can do whatever you want to me in this scene." But he initially didn't like it because he's like, "No, all those things you're seeing are my real reactions. I feel like I'm not acting because I'm so pissed that she keeps hitting me." And So I really credit anything good about that to really their performance and how deep they went into it, because it was all one take. And so
Yeah.
it was messed up that I didn't like about it, we would redo it. Or if like the camera was, we had the steady rig and all this different stuff. But they got to this point emotionally where like I was watching it and I was just like, this is so beautiful. And I cried a little watching the playback. I was like, this is everything I wanted it to be. And so kudos to them and the crew.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, like I said before, I think it's my favorite Kevin Smith movie, and I know that generally speaking, I'm not a huge Kevin Smith fan, although I do give him a ton of credit for helping to sort of spur my interest in screenwriting and I was already really interested in film when I discovered him, because I'm 36, so I was 14 when Clerks came out. So I saw Clerks right around the time that it was out, when it first came out on video, I guess was when I saw it. And, and I just thought it was awesome, and I thought, wow, this guy, he was just a guy and he just made a movie, for like $30,000. Like, where do you even get $30,000? And how do you just make a movie? And it's good. It turned out like, it's like, how does this happen? And, so I've always sort of had a soft spot for him. And Chasing Amy is like the best example of what I think sets his work apart from a lot of other filmmakers that maybe sort of followed in his wake.
Yeah.
And that is that he has heart.
I was
Kevin,
just about to say that.
Yes. Well, of course, because you're a fellow fan of Chasing Amy. I mean, like that, he can be clever and he can be funny, and he can be jokey and sort of set up punchline, and he can be crude, but he always has this sweetness, or at least in his best work, he has this sweetness under everything, this earnestness that to me that makes the whole thing work. Mm-hmm. And if you take that out, then you just have kind of a funny, vulgar movie that you might still enjoy, but you're not really going to remember it. But when he adds that element of sincerity and heart to it, that really makes it work. Is that something that you sort of took with you when you started doing your own writing and directing?
For sure. I mean, heart means everything. And, as I continue to grow and improve as a filmmaker, heart, if I don't love it, and if I don't want to spend 100 hours with it, if I don't want to do all of these, 100 is to say the least, but, if I don't want to 10,000 hours focused on this idea, then it's not worth it. And heart is everything. And I think it shows when a film doesn't have heart, if it's going to work or not. And some movies are visually stunning and perfectly edited and have millions and millions of dollars behind it. And those early Kevin Smith movies have none of that. They have heart, they have good writing, and they have good actors and good directing. And that is what makes them memorable more than anything in the world. There's nothing, most of it are still shots. There's no huge dolly moves that reveal anything big. It doesn't trick you. It doesn't try to trick you. There's just the words on the page and the people bringing it to life. And that's what makes his movies so appealing, at least those early ones. Though I am excited to see Yoga Hosers. I stood in line for it at Sundance and get in because I was in like the queue because I was an idiot and didn't get stuff ahead of time. But no, it was really just a phenomenal experience to go through that. I saw it at 12, and that was way too early. My mom had forgotten just how vulgar that movie was.
Yeah.
So I'm going through this phase where I just wanted to watch Ben Affleck movies because, like, he's Ben Affleck. He's got this incredible charm about him. And that movie just changed everything for me.
I remember, speaking of like how vulgar his movies are, I remember when I was still probably, I think I was still a teenager. I was still a teenager because I was still living at home. And I was watching Clerks. And my grandparents were visiting. And my grandparents, my grandfather has since died, but my grandmother's still alive. They were both like just the coolest people ever. And we would just like hang out, you know what I mean? Like I would just hang out with my grandparents. And my grandmother came down just to see what I was up to and to hang out with me. And I was watching Clerks.
Yeah.
And she sat down and she was like, "Oh, what are you watching?" And I said, "Oh, Clerks." And she's like, "Okay." And she sat down and watched it with me for like 5 minutes and got up and left because she just couldn't take it. You know what I mean? She just couldn't. I think it was the scene where they were behind, where Dante and Veronica were behind the counter, and they were having like conversation about the difference between getting a woman off or getting a guy off, and Granny was just like, okay. So
It's a little much.
for at the time, for like a 60-something-year-old woman, it was a little, you know.
Well, Well, I'm sorry. I was
Go ahead.
Kevin Smith movies. That's what I grew up on. So I thought all movies were just like all dialogue. I never watched any movies that were like super visually stunning. And so I think in my early work, it's very clear that I know nothing about cinematography, and I don't think it matters as long as the story's good, which is not true. But I think that's definitely gotten better. We shot something last weekend that I think is the most beautiful thing I've shot, and so hopefully I can just keep building on that. We had a great DP and, you know, awesome, amazing shit.
Yeah, I did notice when I was watching your Chasing Amy recreation that in the credits on the video it says, or in the description of the video on the page, it says it was for a cinematography class, and I thought, man, that's gutsy to do a Kevin Smith movie for a cinematography class.
Well, the assignment was to make the cinematography better or to recreate it.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I think the cinematography in that scene is not super great. No offense to who shot it, because obviously the movie works great. But I was just like, this is my favorite movie, and there's nothing visually stunning about it. So if we got it in one take, that might make it more powerful. And so that's ultimately what we tried to go with.
Yeah. So after you sort of, you started out with Kevin Smith. He was sort of your entry point. And who are some of the other filmmakers that you have sort of been inspired by since, you know, as you've grown up as a filmmaker?
A lot of my work is kind of inspired by the TV show Girls,
Okay.
and you know, Lena Dunham is a problematic figure in many aspects that a lot of intersectional feminists have problems with. Rightfully so. I mean, all of that is completely justified because, you know, these insensitivities, they affect real people. But that show, there's not a wasted moment on it ever. Every action, every line, it reveals something about the plot or character. And that is the biggest takeaway from that show for me. And it makes these unlikable people just so enjoyable to watch. And that is also important to me, that you can write terrible people and still captivate an audience about it. And it's such a gorgeous show. And it really does hone in on the realities of upper middle class white millennial women, which is a very specific target audience. So fucking true. I have a group of friends that are just like these girls. And it's amazing to see the similarities and horrifying. And we talk about it because we actually have a podcast where we like dissect the episode and what was great about it and how the writing has been good. Because it's all
it's Girls Who Like Girls, right? Is that your podcast?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, see, hey, everybody, go listen to that too. Go check out The Seed and Spark for Polly, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and go listen to Savannah's podcast. Yeah, and you know, you're right that Lena Dunham is sort of a problematic figure, which makes it even more frustrating that she's such a damn great writer.
I know.
I mean, she's such a great writer.
For behavior like that, but god damn, if she doesn't write some brilliant shit. And it seems like, you know, maybe as time goes on, maybe these incidents will occur less and less. And I'm not perfect either, but I'm also not pissing off people on such a grand scale.
Yeah.
But god damn, what a good writer. And it also brings up the debate, like, what are we willing to sacrifice to be entertained? And a lot of people won't watch your work because of that kind of stuff, which I totally respect. But for me, seeing that show before all the controversy started and just following that show, it's been a great journey for me, and it's made me a better writer, just watching the way that these characters interact and seeing, you know, how much subtext is behind every single moment. And that is so important. And there's always something to learn from everything you ever watch, whether that's good or bad. But I've learned so much from that. And also, you know, there are all like the standard things like, you know, Quentin Tarantino, his movies. I mean, there's a reason they're so popular. You know,
Absolutely.
That guy knows how to make a fucking movie. But, you know, there's also great new filmmakers on the scene, like Justin Simeon with Dear White People. That was one of the most movies I've seen in a long time. Issa Rae's work is great. I'm really excited to watch Insecure.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's like new on HBO. It's great. Louis C.K. does great work.
Oh my God, Louis C.K. is so good as a director; it pisses me off.
Dude, I just did a gig. I did a gig in Lawrence, and he directed a comedy special for Barry Crimmins in Lawrence, and I got to work by Louis a lot, and he like sent me off to go get B-roll, and I was in charge of the B-roll, and I was like, Louis C.K. just told me to direct some B-roll. I'm so excited. But
That's awesome.
It was pretty fucking cool. That's probably my most like high profile gig I've had as a freelancer, and it was really interesting to watch him direct a comedy special, because it's so different from a lot of his narrative work. But the way he does things is very interesting, and see him at his command station, you know, telling camera operators when to push in and push out, like he's just multi-focused, and he's so damn good at it. So that was an amazing experience to be a part of.
Yeah, Louis C.K. is one of those people that, because I had been a fan of his stand-up like for years, and I started to get into him like really heavily when his special Hilarious came out. Yeah. And I thought, God, this is just so funny. And then that was about the point when he was doing like a new special every year. And then he started Louis, his series. And the first season of Louis, I thought, oh, this is pretty good. You know, like I like this. And then the second season was like the best thing I'd ever seen. I was like, what? Like, this is like the best show on TV. And he like writes all the episodes. He directs almost all of the episodes himself and edits it himself. And it's like, this isn't fair. Like, this isn't fair. Yeah, but I think it's cool that that you can cite like television as some of your inspiration, because a lot of people, I mean, we're in sort of a golden age of television now in terms of like showrunners and having shows having like more singular creative visions, and it's not as embarrassing to say you watch TV as it was when I was a kid. Right.
Well, I would love my ultimate career goal, be a showrunner for a platform like Netflix or premium cable like HBO. That's the ultimate dream, because episodic content's amazing as a writer and also as a fan, because you're getting more of what you want. I feel like a movie is so self-contained that it's a little heartbreaking when it ends. And I'm selfish and I want to make as much as possible. So that's part of the reason that I'm doing Poly, and I get to showrunner of that, which has been great. And we just got to make the money first, and then do the fun part, which is shooting it and making it for people.
So when you sit down and you start to sort of break Poly down, and you first, I'm familiar with some of the process because I've done it myself, but I've never actually had to face, okay, I'm going to do a series and I'm serious. You know what I mean? Like, do you have at this point at the stage of development that Poly is in? Do you have like an idea? Do you know what the story for the first season would be, or do you have ideas beyond that? Or are you thinking it's just completely open-ended, or are you saying like, well, if I could get like, if I could only get 5 series and I could make it perfect, you know what I mean? Like, is it a closed thing for you, or are you just going to make as many as you possibly can?
I'm pretty open. There are some ideas that I have where I have mapped out every single episode. I know exactly how each one, what it leads to. But with Poly, it's a more collaborative process, and if we got a series order, like I would hope, through this process that we're doing, I get a writer's room together, and then I would probably arc out what I want season 1 to be with my creative partner Riley, and then we would see where season 2 went if we got one. And doing it independently is certainly an option if we don't get the green light to make it for this specific thing. But if I had the money and the resources, there would definitely be something that's very, very concise. But at this point, it's really just going through and exploring what these characters can do and kind of seeing where it goes episode by episode. Because I feel like how fluid these characters are really reflects in the process of the show, and how there's so many possibilities because this has rarely ever been done before. So we don't want to limit ourselves too much and like decide this is it, Yeah. So.
Yeah, and sometimes that takes a little bit of the fun away too. Not that you want it to be. I mean, it can't it can't be completely about having fun, because you do want it to be like, unfortunately you're creating a product in addition to doing something creative, and you want it to be good. But I found in my experience, if you write or you plan too far ahead too rigidly, sometimes that kind of takes a little bit of the joy out of it, because then you don't feel like you're creating anymore. You feel like you're just kind of coloring in stuff that you already did.
Right. Well, and there are a lot of shows that that try to stick too hard to a rigid plan, and it's very obvious by the time the series finale hits, because it kind of jumps out of nowhere, and they're like, "We've had this plan for years," and then but the show isn't about their original ending anymore.
Right.
Evolved and it's changed, and people don't want to deviate away from that plan because they've had it set in stone so long. And I learned that lesson with a couple of shows, just watching it. And I never want to be that showrunner that's like, no, my idea is so empirical, it's so necessary. It's all about what these characters do, what these writers come up with, what these actors add to it, that we can't just plan it out all ahead at once, even if that would maybe be more convenient at sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely takes on a life of its own.
Certainly.
Yeah. So in sort of a nutshell, tell us what Poly is about. What's the premise? Who are the people? Why should we be super excited about this becoming a thing?
Well, not just because I'm doing it. No.
That's one reason.
Oh, yeah. So the premise of Poly is this polyamorous triad moves to the suburbs in the conservative Midwest, and they're trying to fit in with this neighborhood full of your typical compassionate bigots. Think they're really progressive, but they're not. They're really not. And so this polyamorous triad made up of AJ, who is a bisexual woman, Cricket, who is a pansexual woman with Asperger's, to add to more intersectionality for the show. And then we have Jake, who is a pansexual man who's kind of the craziest of the group. He's very dramatic. He's really funny, but he's not necessarily intending to be funny. He's just very dramatic. Like, if you rip the covers away from him in bed while he's trying to sleep, he will like cry out in his sleep because that has upset him so deeply. So he's this very mellow. He's this very dramatic man who is a diva, and he's kind of the center of all the crazy. Cricket's a bit more blunt in her delivery of a lot of jokes, and then AJ's kind of the glue that holds everything together. Like, all right, we got to get our shit together, guys. And they're trying to fit in with this neighborhood, and it's not necessarily working out because there's the queer aspect to it, where people are uncomfortable with, the whole or same-sex relationship portion of it. They're uncomfortable with the lack of traditional, like the nuclear family. They want to have kids, but then the rest of the neighborhood is very concerned over whether or not it's going to be a nuclear family and all these different things. So they're not fitting in, and it's all about the shenanigans that happen in this very suburban environment. Because what's really interesting is upper middle class, rich white people, they're the most dramatic people on the planet, and they create all kinds of new problems for themselves that didn't originally exist. Like, once you get past the idea of needing to survive and like needing to like be able to put food on the table, then drama opens up tremendously. And I learned that from a friend who's a cinematographer and a screenwriter, actually. His name's Hanuman Brown Eagle, but he taught me that very important lesson, and it's so fucking true. So what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to open up, the world to these people who are like the odd couple in a way, although they're straight, so they're the odd triad.
The odd throuple.
Right, but they don't feel queer enough for the LGBTQ community because they're a closed triad and they don't have sex outside of their triad. And they don't feel, like they're part of a nuclear family, so they don't fit in their own neighborhood. So it's being caught between two worlds and trying to navigate, all of those issues.
Yeah, when I first read the summary of it, when you messaged me about it and brought it to my attention, I just thought it sounded like such a great idea. And what I love about it is that on one hand, it's very high concept. You know what I mean? Like, you can, which again is something that is sort of thrown around like an epithet sometimes, but there's nothing wrong with high concept if it's a good concept. And, so it's something that you can describe really quickly. Yeah. So polyamorous triad moves to the heartland. Okay, got it. You know what I mean? But there's so much room within that for exploration and for humor and for character, and just, the idea of a show about queer characters that is being made with LGBTQ people behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. I mean, that's like, it's that sort of thing. It should not be nearly as rare as it is.
Right.
I mean, I know people say this all the time, but it's like, I mean, it's 2016.
Yeah.
Like it feels like, at least to me, and I know to a lot of us, it feels like we should be further ahead than we are, and something like,
I get homophobic responses from actors who tell me they want a role or respond to a casting call that I post. Like, they're surprised, and I'm like, have you even ever met me? What did you think this was going to be about? So I'm always surprised about that. But there are really great LGBTQ content creators out there, like Jen Richards with her story. Brilliant. Yeah. Binged it. I wanted to cry. It was so authentic. And I think what we're bringing to the table is a level of authenticity that may not exist otherwise, because we are in this community and we have sensitivity leaders giving us feedback on our scripts who are poly. And we're trying to do right by people, and we just want to make stuff that will make people laugh, but also treat queer people like people and not just tokens. And it's not about their sexuality. Other people make it about whether or not they're monogamous. They make it about that. But these are just people trying to go about their lives, and that's the angle we're playing it from.
Yeah, and one of the things I love too, and I think you mentioned it a little bit just there, the idea that it's, in addition to all of the wonderful representation and all of the things that, all of the issues it's going to be touching on, is the idea is that it's funny. It's to make people laugh. And there's this really unfair, completely inaccurate, in my experience, stereotype that people who are sort of conscious in the LGBTQ community, who define themselves and label themselves and try to be empowered by their identities, that somehow they're all humorless, or they take things too seriously, or they're too sensitive. And you kind of poked fun at that a little bit with one of the shorts that you showed me, the politically correct thing that you did. But and in my experience, that is, nothing could be further from the truth. Thanks to the internet and a little bit in real life, I've gotten to know people throughout my life and been close friends with people who are gay and who are bi and who are trans and who are polyamorous and who are pansexual and all the various colors of the rainbow. I count myself very lucky to have connected with so many great people from all these different experiences, and they're some of the funniest, coolest people I know. Like, they're not these uptight, shrewish sort of people that are just waiting for you to fuck up so they can jump all over you.
Nobody wants to get worked up and upset because somebody said something that was homophobic or racist or something along those lines. Nobody wants to be in a bad mood. Nobody wants confrontation. Not in the, I mean, maybe some people like confrontation, but I certainly don't. And people act like we're in this politically correct climate where people can't say anything. It's like, oh, I can't say, I can't say the R word anymore. Can I have any fun? And I'm like, why is that your only source of fun?
Exactly.
Have you ever seen a meme? Those are hilarious. Everybody can agree on memes that aren't just terrible and taking aim at the shit that others people in society, conscious of other people's feelings and having empathy. That doesn't mean that you don't have a sense of humor. Because that's just a bullshit statement that people say because they want to say the words that they think are acceptable. But it's just just don't be an asshole to people. And that's really what the idea of being socially conscious is about at the end of the day, just being respectful and showing up, to be a good person. I don't, it just drives me crazy. So that's what Politically Correct was a response to, was, you can't say anything fun anymore, it's just a ridiculous idea.
Yeah, there were a few moments in that one that had me cracking up. There was the one when one of the characters was referred to as White Tyson. That just killed me for some reason. And then he objected to it. He was like, "Why am I White Tyson? Why isn't he Black Tyson?" I just thought that was hilarious.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, it's like I say, it hasn't been my experience at all. And the thing about it is, like you said, just try not to be an asshole.
Right.
And it's not, I mean, you'll never get it perfect. Like, you will screw up from time to time, but it's not hard to try.
Mhm.
Like, it's the easiest thing in the world to just make an effort to be nice to people and to be sensitive to other people's feelings. And it doesn't mean you can't make fucking jokes, and it doesn't mean you can't have a good time or you can't relax or what. I mean, that's just, I mean, they piss me off, but in another way, when I'm not having to deal with them and I can sort of, view them as abstractions, I kind of feel sorry for people like that. I kind of feel sorry for people who think that like their whole sense of humor is just built around putting people down, and like pushing people into the puddle and pointing and laughing at them. Like, that's the only thing they can conceive of as being funny.
That's crazy to me. Like, have you ever seen a pug? Because those are just funny just to look like, like they're just sources of joy in the world. I mean, look at this guy.
Come on.
I mean, he's just so funny right now. Look at him. Look at this little ham. Like, there are just so many. There's so many good things in the world. There's so many funny things in the world, and to appeal to the lowest common, denominator and the lowest form of humor constantly, that doesn't push any boundaries of comedy like a lot of people think it does. Punching up at people who were really shitty, that is funny. Like, just having an original thought that's not, a racial epithet, that's funny.
Yeah, because that's not even that original.
Yeah.
Like, I hear that all the time. I was born, not actually born, but I grew up in a town in Western Maryland with a population of about 500 people.
Yeah.
Almost entirely white. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was the type of place where everybody, there were hardly ever any really super mean people, but there was like just this casual racism that was just everywhere, where people would just drop racial epithets just in conversation because they knew everybody was okay with it, and that's sort of the atmosphere that I grew up in. And, to have people like that get all grouchy when, all of a sudden it's not okay, to call black people by that word anymore, or to call like neuroatypical people by that word anymore.
Right. It's just shitty. It's all shitty, but I try to do as much of the shittiness as possible with comedy, and so far it's working. I recently made a comedy that I sent you that's not ready, but it's called Welcome to MA. And
yes.
So, like, I'm hoping that will evoke some good responses, too, about, some feminist issues. And hopefully people like it.
I know it was, the version I saw was the rough cut. But,
yeah, it's not done, but.
But I thought there were a lot of good things in that. I love the bowler, the ex-bowler. He was just really funny. I thought that actor was just really funny, the way he would say his lines.
Yeah, his name's Gregory Lee Nielsen. He was in Chasing Amy 1, and he was White Tyson in Politically Correct. And he's so versatile, and he's just so really funny. So it's always a joy to work with that guy.
Yeah. Have you ever, speaking of the characters, or not the characters, like the actual people we were just talking about a moment ago, like the people who are sort of casually bigoted, they don't mean anything by it, but they're just sort of, those people, so there are going to be some sort of characters like that, I assume, from what we were talking about in Poly. Does writing those characters or trying to create those sorts of characters, does that sort of help you to kind of humanize them? Because I know I've had that experience in some things I've written in the past, where like I would write, I'm writing like kind of a bigoted character,
right?
And even though like I hate the words that I'm having come out of this person's mouth, like at the same time I'm writing a story about them, so I can't completely hate them.
Right.
That's just not. I just can't write that way. I can't write about people that I just absolutely hate. I have to find something redeeming in them,
right.
And that can kind of serve as a nice reminder to people in real life. You can say, oh God, that guy's such an asshole, but maybe he's like really sweet with his dog.
Right.
Like have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, I mean, no decent writer hates their characters, like genuinely hates them. Because if you're writing it from that perspective, they're not going to be a real person. There's nothing complex about it. And every character is complex because they're a person, and everybody has, you know, all of these thoughts and feelings that can be overwhelming sometimes. And certainly bigoted people fit into that category maybe more so than anybody else, because they're dealing with a lot of shit that's led them to be this way. And while it doesn't necessarily humanize people that I know that are like that, it is cathartic to write and to be able to deal with any issues that I faced in real life through my work. And so, so the head of the neighborhood moms in Poly, her name is Cindy. She is a soccer mom to a T. And in the pilot that we're doing, she essentially instigates this homophobic remark that leads to kind of like the climax of the episode. And it's based on a real thing that happened to me, where I was with my partner, and we were kissing at the neighborhood pool, and she comes up to me and she says, "Hey, you know, I heard there was kissing over here, and you know, I respect whatever y'all want to do, but you know, I haven't talked with my kids about this yet, so if we could just, you know, be respectful of people's children, that'd be great."
Oh my God.
And people had to hold me back because I lunged at her. I was so infuriated. I was in the water, so I couldn't reach her, but like I was fuming, and I couldn't believe that somebody would do that.
Yeah.
But these people think that they're coming from a good place. Like that woman genuinely thought she was doing a nice thing. You know?
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling, but being able to write these characters and humanizing them in that way, it is cathartic, and it makes me feel better, if nothing else.
Yeah, I know. I've had that experience with people through interacting on the internet. I've never had that experience in real life because I'm about as privileged as you can get, except for the fact that I'm an atheist. Like pretty much everything else about me is like the you know, and the thing about being an atheist is you can pass.
Exactly.
so it doesn't really.
Except I can't hold back my snarky comments sometimes. It just feels like you know, like somebody will be like, "Thank God that the AC is working." I'm like, "Did God do that?"
Thank whatever, you know, slave worker in Bangladesh put that AC together. Thank that person.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I've had that experience online where people like they'll tweet something at me, or they'll leave a YouTube comment, and it'll be like the most awful viewpoint, but couched in this really friendly, polite language.
Yeah.
And my response almost always is to block that person.
Right.
And sometimes what they'll do is if they're really whiny and babyish about it, like I'll block somebody on Twitter, and then that same person will come leave me a comment on YouTube and say, "Why'd you block me on Twitter? I was just asking you a question, and I was really polite, and I wasn't mean or anything." And you know, my philosophy, kind of like how you were describing that woman who sort of accosted you at the pool.
Great for it.
there's no nice way to say those things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can be as sweet and as friendly in your tone as you want, but there's certain things that there's, at least to my ears, there's just no nice way to say it. You know, there's no nice way to say, "Well, I don't really think racism is a problem anymore. I think black people should just get over that." There's no nice way to say that, because that's an awful viewpoint. You know, there's no nice way to say, you know, "Well, you know, women have it better than men anyway." Like, dude, no, shut up. Don't. If that thought comes out of your head, it's awful to me, and I'm not interested in talking to you, no matter how sweet you are when you say it.
I completely agree. I just had an actor respond to an email after I sent them the sides, and they very politely, to be euphemistic, I guess, they very politely said, "At this point in my life, I'm not comfortable playing a homosexual role. Thank you for considering me, though." Smiley face. And I saw them later, and they asked me about it, and I was like, "No, that was actually really hurtful." It kind of doesn't matter how nice you try to be about it. Yeah. What you're saying is that you're uncomfortable with LGBTQ folks like me. Yeah. And there's no nice way to say that. You can put as many fucking smiley faces as you want, but that's still hurtful. And I hope people, you know, take away, you know, any it's acting is empathy. And if you don't have empathy to do that, then what are you doing?
Yeah. And if you're not willing to be vulnerable.
Right.
You know, I mean,
I also see it as like the equivalent of being like, "Oh, I'm not comfortable playing opposite, a Latino man or like a disabled man or something like, even if you want to put it in like a heteronormative context, like you're still saying you're not comfortable with a person, an entire group of people for who they are. And obviously race and homophobia have different layers of it, but that closest that I can equate it to. And I'm hoping that maybe that stops happening, but it's happened a few times now, and it's really disheartening because it's with people who have interacted with great, and then as soon as they realize what you're about, then they just back the fuck up.
Yeah, it would be, there's no way for that not to be hurtful, but it would at least be a little better if if someone like that, if they wouldn't give as their stated reason, like, I don't want to play a gay character.
Yeah.
Like, that's your bullshit. Just keep that to yourself. Just just tell the director, you know what, I looked at this and I don't think there's anything that I could really do here.
But I'm glad that they kind of out themselves as those kinds of people, and maybe I have to bear the brunt of it in terms of hurt feelings, but at least I'm aware of it, and I don't make the mistake of working with a person who feels that way.
Or you just take it the other direction and you make sure that they get all of your gay character casting calls, like, from now on.
Right. There's a pattern here.
Yeah. So why is it? We're both on the same page with this. I'm fairly certain. But for anybody watching who might wonder about this, why is it that representation is so important when we make movies, when we make TV shows, even when we write literature or make comic books or whatever? Because, like, one of the things I really loved about the selection of your work that I was able to watch before this was when I watch your stuff, you see white faces, you see black faces, you see Latinx, you see Asian, you see men, you see women, you see trans, you see cis, you see straight, gay, whatever. Like, you have a lot of diversity and across a wide range of spectrums just in the small portion of stuff that I watched of yours today. And I thought that was fantastic. Why is that important? Like, why for you as a filmmaker, as a writer, as a director, why is it important to make sure that, that the people in your stories don't wind up just being people that look like you?
Because if you see yourself, you exist. And, growing up, I didn't ever see anybody like me. And I'm white, and I'm pansexual, and the closest representation I ever felt I got was Alyssa Jones, who's much more feminine than I am. And just, so I don't ever see people who look like me on TV. I can't imagine what it's like to be a person of color and deal with that. Or, to be transgender and to see that the only roles that you ever see trans women play are sex workers. Not that there's anything wrong with being a sex worker, but it's become an ugly stereotype that, trans women have to fight to escape. And all these other different kind of intersections. It's just, the more content that's out there, the better stories are out there. If you're not conforming to the mold that already exists, and you're writing real characters, then it just makes your work better. Look at Hamilton. Most popular musical in the world right now. If a bunch of white dudes were doing Lin-Manuel's raps, nobody would give a shit.
Exactly.
Nobody would give a shit. It's really, it attests to the power of representation and what it can do for people, and how it can really uplift communities that feel underrepresented. There's a reason that's the most popular musical in the world right now. There's so many fucking great pieces of art. I just talked about Her Story a little bit ago, but that's the most authentic representation of trans women I have ever seen. And it was beautiful. And it incorporated actual diversity, not just adding a token black character, a token gay character. It was through and through by trans people, for trans people, and for a wider audience. And it's changing the fucking world the way Hamilton is. And God, I would love to have the opportunity to help someone the way that those works have helped people.
Yeah. That's that. One of the first things I learned in writing class in college. And by the time I took writing classes in college, I had been writing on my own, like, for years and years and years. But when you first get, like, writing instruction, one of the first really important lessons that we were taught that I guess is often taught in writing classes is when you write, you should be as specific as possible. You know, don't try to write universally, because then you'll just end up writing just vague, meaningless bullshit. Write specifically as possible. And then that specificity is what will allow people to connect with it when they read it or watch it or whatever. And there's something that I experience that's very similar to that when I watch like a movie or a TV show that isn't aimed at my demographic.
Right.
You know, there's a sensation of watching something like that and thinking like this, or something kind of thrilling about it, because it's like, this isn't for me. You know, I'm like a white cis hetero guy, so virtually everything is for me. Mm-hmm. You know, like almost every TV show and movie ever made is for me, is designed to please people like me, or what they think people like me are like. And when you see something that is pitched at a black audience or an LGBT audience, you know, or for women, or for whatever, there's something thrilling about that. And it doesn't mean that you can't access it. It doesn't mean that if I, as a white person, watch a movie that's made by and for black people, or I, as a cis person, you know, watch a movie that's by or for trans people, it doesn't mean that I can't relate to it. There's probably lots of stuff in there that I can relate to and I can connect with. And, you know, and there's a lesson there that just because they're different, and just because they're telling stories about themselves rather than about people like me, doesn't mean that like they're aliens, that I have no idea what they're talking about. I actually know I have a good idea what they're talking about, even though there's also going to be stuff in there that I'm not going to understand or I'm not going to have any experience with, you know? So and I always say that, our movies and our TV shows and our books, our fiction, they're how we tell ourselves who we are. You know, they're like our narrative that we create about our culture. And if you don't have voices from everybody in that narrative, then it's not true. You're telling yourselves, we're telling ourselves that we are somebody that we're not, because we're leaving people out, you know? So, and when we forget about that, we end up getting, you know, now everybody sits around wondering how is Donald Trump almost the president? You know, and
a whole other chat about that.
I know. We could, you know what? I'm holding back already, because as soon as you brought up Hamilton, like the hair on my neck stood up. I was like, we could just nerd out about Hamilton for the rest of the goddamn night.
Sure.
But I'm like waiting on pins and needles, because they filmed the whole thing before the original cast left. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, you know, if I believed in a God, I would be praying to that God that it ends up on PBS as like a great performances or something, because I never got to see the show on Broadway, and I'm not going to be able to see it anytime soon. And just to be able to see that show is like
so good.
Oh, damn it! I want to see that show.
I imagine it so beautifully in my head, and like if I listen to the soundtrack, I have to start writing like spec scenes for if I direct a movie. This is how each thing would exactly go. But it's such a good writing exercise. I would never get to direct that movie in a million years. I'll probably give it to like Ava DuVernay or Ryan Coogler or somebody like of great stature who is a person of color who like really understands the work and stuff like that. But if I could direct any movie ever, it'd be the Hamilton movie.
So do you actually, okay, we have to at least talk about this, because this is fascinating to me, because I can't see it as a movie. I've tried. Because I've listened to the soundtrack. I don't even know how many times. Like I for the last like couple months, I've had the soundtrack going as I write for my YouTube stuff, and it ends up taking twice as long because I'm listening to the music instead of writing. But like I have trouble picturing it as a movie, because I've seen like clips of the stage show, and I sort of have an idea of what the stage presentation is like, and I guess I'm just too locked into that. Do you actually have like ideas of like how you would stage it as a movie?
Oh my God, yeah. No,
that's awesome.
Nonstop is probably my favorite show or song in the show, and I am currently writing something based on that. And it's very complicated. and it would be so expensive because, you know, after the war I went back to New York, and then we have, you know, we show Burr and Hamilton at their respective colleges. And so that's like boom, boom, a lot of location changes, a lot of fancy camera moves. When Burr starts singing the reprise of Wait For It, like there's a lot of whip pans kind of like following him around. It's like very intense. I've got so many ideas for.
Oh man.
It's very cinematic in my head. I mean, I've seen a lot of like the clips and everything, and I've watched every clip that's out there that I possibly can. I watched all the 60-minute stuff, like everything. And I'm really excited for the PBS documentary.
Yeah, me too.
And but I see it very cinematically in my head, and there's some things that are concerning because some things, you know, you can do with theater that you just can't do with film. And one thing is the age thing, because Lin-Manuel and Javier Munoz, you know, they're playing Hamilton the entire time. Yeah. That's not how aging works, you know, but it translates well on stage because there's a suspension of disbelief when it comes to age. So it would be interesting to see how it would translate into, you know, cinematic form. So I have a lot of, like, ideas for how it would look cinematically, but there's some practical things that I haven't figured out how I would do it. But, like, every time I'm listening to it, like, in the shower or something like that, I'm like, how would I fix this problem? You know? But it's such an amazing show.
And I don't even like musicals.
Yeah?
And I'm like obsessed with it. I mean, I have this memory from like probably 15 years ago now. Before I was with my wife, I dated a girl for about 2 years, and she was really into musicals, and I was just like not into it at all. And I have this memory of like me and her and one of her friends were like going out somewhere, and she and her friend were in the front seat of the car, and I was in the back seat of the car, and they were listening to the original soundtrack of the Broadway version of Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay.
And they were just having a ball. I mean, they were just like singing along and jamming to it, and I was just in the back seat, like, you know, like just not into it at all. Yeah. And now I'm like crazy about Hamilton, so.
Yeah, I love musicals. Moulin Rouge is one of my all-time.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's just, it's fantastic.
I'm softening to it in my old age, I guess. I mean, it's like I used to have this hard-on against Disney movies. I used to just like, hey, I'm never going to watch a Disney movie. I hate a Disney movie. And I think it was like an angry young man sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because as I get older, I'm like, I guess they're not so bad.
Yeah.
You know, and with musicals, it's like, I guess they're not so bad. But like, who's your favorite character in Hamilton? We'll do this, and then we'll move on to something else. Who's your favorite character?
I feel like I relate to Hamilton the most.
Yeah.
In terms of my like blind ambition, I definitely recognize the faults that he has, and so there's a lot to learn from, and there's a lot to learn from Burr. But I mean, I think everybody says this, but Angelica, that's my favorite character right there.
Oh man, I love Angelica. I tell you what, Burr is my favorite character, but Satisfied, I think, is my favorite song.
Oh, so brilliant.
That song just kills me. Like, it just wrecks me. And that, I mean, I every time I listen to it, I'm like,
right?
Because it's just so great. It just, I don't know.
I love it.
So anyway,
that's our side to geek out about Hamilton.
We'll have to just, you know, hang out sometime off the air and just, you know, talk shit about Hamilton for as long as we can stand it, because that's like, because I have to hold back while I'm like moving around the house, because if I lived alone, or I had no regard for the feelings of my wife at all, I would just be singing from the soundtrack like all day. I know, I'd be like, I could probably do it. I've listened to it enough. I could probably do the whole thing. And you know, but okay, so we've been chatting for about an hour, so I think it's probably time to start wrapping up. So let's give one final push to the kind viewers at home. Where can they go to find out about Polly, and why should they give you lots of money and tell all their friends about it? So
you can find Polly through a lot of mediums. The most direct one would be seedandspark.com/fund/Polly. That's our crowdfunding site. You can also go to my website, SavannahRodgers.com. We have a Facebook page, Facebook.com/PolySeries, and then we're on Twitter @PolySeries. So you can talk with us in a variety of ways. We would love to, talk about ideas with you and what a show like this could potentially do for you, or why you should care about it in the first place. I'm totally open to talking about it. I run all the social media accounts, so your showrunner is very hands-on. But the biggest reason that I think it's really important to support shows like this is that everybody who is not worried about starving has some kind of economic buying power. And every dollar that we spend shapes the world that we want to be in. And whether we like to admit it or not, whenever we give a dollar to something, that shapes what you think you should be spending your money on, or what you have to be spending your money on a lot of times. And so entertainment has never been free, but, because there's advertisers, there's all kinds of people pulling the strings for larger shows, network executives and stuff like that. And a lot of executives are really, really bad at their jobs because they're doing the same crap over and over again and making all their money on like one show or one movie and, doing these for-year consideration campaigns to make, several more $1 million in terms of like the Oscars and the Emmys and all that stuff. Yeah. We're independent. We solely rely on our audience and our gorgeous contributors. And so the reason that you should put money into this, if you're able and you're willing, is that we are trying to represent you. We are trying to fix a lot of issues that we see with media. And a lot of people get really upset because they don't see themselves, but we're trying to rectify that. So by supporting shows like ours, you are making a difference. You are shaping how you want to see media. And by putting even $1 into our campaign, you're becoming a part of our community. And you're going to be in the credits, and you are going to be invaluable to the process of the show. And that's why it's so important, because it's about you. You are putting in what you want to see, and that's how it should work. The people should decide what content should be out there. It shouldn't just be up to, the creators. It should be up to, people should be able to be like, I need a show like this. I want to see myself on TV. And not that there's necessarily a responsibility to, whoever, but we want to represent you guys, and we care about you, and we care about the effects of media. And we would appreciate it so much if you joined our community. Contributions start as low as $1, and you can go up to $1,000 if you're super rich and you're in love with it. Who cares? It's just all about serving you guys and creating art that we're passionate about. And to be a part of that, I think, would be a really special experience. And we would love it, and we would appreciate it, and we're so thankful for anybody who's already contributed or said anything about it. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, that every single person who has followed our campaign to help us get closer to $8,000 in post-production being covered, to every person who's given $1 or more, every person who shared the link on their Facebook page or their Twitter account, it means so fucking much. You guys are the best. So we're just trying to get more people in on this project because we think it's special, and we want you to be a part of it, and we want you to be a part of our community.
There you go. Yeah. So seedandspark.com/fun/poly. It sounds like it's going to be funny. It sounds like it's going to be kind of beautiful. So if you think it's interesting, if you're watching this and you think this sounds like your sort of thing, help Savannah and her team to make this thing happen. As she said, help to shape the world into what you want it to be. Go to that website, donate if you can afford it, share it far and wide. It sounds like it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to see it. Savannah, thank you so much for joining me, for doing this. This was a ton of fun.
Thank you. I can't believe you were like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm just like, hell yes. I would love to talk to Steve Jobs about movies for an hour. That's amazing.
I thought we had a great time. So I hope everybody watching got something out of it too. Hey folks, one last thing. Savannah and myself both wanted to offer a shout out and some appreciation and love to Jacob Hyde, who is actually the person responsible for Savannah and I even knowing each other. He suggested to Savannah some years ago that she check out my stuff on YouTube, and she did, and we got in touch and became Facebook friends, and now here we are. So thank you so much, Jacob, for supporting Savannah's work and for being a friend to me, and just being the facilitator of this very cool thing that we just did. You can learn more about Savannah's work by going to savannahrodgers.com, and as we've mentioned numerous times already, you can learn more about her upcoming series Polly, and also pledge to support Polly by going to seedandspark.com/fund/Polly. Thanks everybody for watching. See you next time.